Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Well, Ocean Robbins, welcome to the show today. So happy to have you on.
Thrilled to be with you.
Yes. I love your work. Love what you've got going on. I want to learn more about it. I've started to learn more about you and your father. That's so cool that you and your father work together in this. But that's amazing. I love hearing stories like that. But really, talk to us about what is the Food Revolution Network, and then your book, The 31-Day Food Revolution: Heal Your Body, Feel Great, and Transform Your World. Kind of, who is Ocean Robbins, and kind of what's your passion?
Okay, wow, there's a lot in that. Okay. Well,
and I don't ask
who is
any more
Ocean
questions.
Robbins? I am a soul on a journey of healing. I'm also an activist and an educator, and I'm on a mission, as is Food Revolution Network, to change the way the world eats.
Yes,
we have a toxic food culture,
right?
And the impact of that toxic food culture is that industrialized agriculture has become the most environmentally destructive force on the planet.
Totally agree.
The impact of that system is that our toxic food culture is killing us by the billions, and it's threatening our ability to provide food for future generations of humans. In the United States, we now spend 18% of our gross domestic product on what we call healthcare, but it's really disease symptom management.
Right.
And the vast majority of that is on treating the symptoms of chronic disease, 80% of which could be prevented with changes in diet.
Right. And
so
health.
At a financial level, we're spending more than twice as much money, actually 3 times as much money in the US on the medical system as we are on the defense budget.
Wow.
And most of that could be saved. So you think about how much we could do with that money.
Right.
You know, what problems we could solve,
Sure.
how we could uplift everybody, or reduce taxes, or whatever the heck you want to do with it.
Good
all
stuff.
simply by changing what we eat and save millions of lives, and improve the quality of life for just about everybody else. I mean, 2/3 of our population is overweight or obese.
Right.
We have the fattest and sickest population in the history of the world in the United States right now.
Right.
And we could turn that around with simple changes to diet and lifestyle. So I'm kind of on a mission to shift that so that we can save lives, save our economy, save Medicare, save our planet with changes in diet and lifestyle. And that's what Food Revolution Network's up to.
Love it. And so when you say up to, let's lean into more of that. So Food Revolution Network, obviously you have a ton of passion around this, and it's a really not just the United States, but really globally. This is more of a global, but I'm sure you're focusing on the United States. But
it is.
So what do you do at Food Revolution Network to help people understand, educate, integrate, right?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, it is global. I mean, everybody eats, right?
Right.
And everybody needs food to live. And interestingly, genetics matter, but at the end of the day, what you eat unlocks certain genes and shuts down other genes. So what we find is that, the more people eat like Americans, the more they suffer and die like Americans.
Right.
And the American way of producing food is spreading around the world, and with it, waistlines are expanding and hospitals are filling up and people are getting sick and fat like us.
Right.
So this has global impact. So what do we do? Well, we have an online community of over 700,000 members. We have a newsletter that we send out regularly, just kind of with action updates and resources and tips. We have a website with a blog with, hundreds of articles focused on leading edge food and health topics and authoritative nutritional advice and, data-driven research. And we also have online courses and ebooks and cookbooks and my own book, 31-Day Food Revolution, which is a national bestseller. And we are just working to spread the word in all kinds of ways. The Food Revolution Summit is our biggest annual event.
Right.
Millions of people have gone through that over the last 11 years. And in that, I work with my dad and colleague, John Robbins, who's a 2 million copy best-selling author himself, to interview some of the top food experts on the planet. And so we interview all these folks. We broadcast that all for free. And folks can go to foodrevolutionsummit.org to listen to the latest summit replays, hear these leading edge experts share their wisdom, and it's all completely free.
Oh, I love it. If you are enjoying this chat with our friend Ocean Robbins, then you're really going to love his documentary, The Need to Grow. It's a timely, solutions-based look at the end of farmable soil. We love inspiring stories here at the podcast, and this film is full of inspirational speakers and motivating information. Check out the link in the show notes. So let's just pretend everybody is eating the traditional American diet, which is not great for us, right? In fact, it's unhealthy altogether. So typically, how do you kind of start people or educate people from knowing nothing into kind of starting to learn about, what are maybe some basics, and or where does somebody who's just getting into this get started?
Well, if you're somebody who's just getting started, maybe you've eaten a fairly standard American diet your whole life. First, I want to say, it's urgent and it matters. And no matter where you are in your stage of life, it matters. If you're early in life, it matters the most because, of course, changing habits will impact you for the rest of your life, right? If you're later in life and you've already eaten, maybe not the best to this point.
Right.
Some people say, oh, is it too late for me? You can't teach an old dog new tricks. I've already dug my own grave, maybe, or maybe not, but I'll take my chances. I'm not going to change now. But here's the thing, the worse you've eaten so far, the more you have to gain from making a change. The more likely it is that you're going to have arteries that clog up, you're going to suffer from dementia, you're going to get cancer, other health ailments that could be prevented with changes now. So really the best time to start is now. They always say the best time to plant a fruit tree is about 15 years ago, but the next best time is today, right? You start where you are and you do the best you can. And it's not a purity pact situation. You don't have to be holier than thou or be perfect. We can't make the perfect into the enemy of the good. So I'm really big on starting where you are and taking steps that are sustainable to change habits, not draconian diets that you implement for a month and then go right back to where you were. Because at the end of the day, it's what you do day in and day out that matters the most. And so, you could start with getting rid of the bad stuff, clearing out some of the worst offenders in your kitchen. For some people, that's going to be hot dogs and, Coca-Cola and high fructose corn syrup and, super processed junk foods. And for other people, that's going to be, they're going to be a little more refined, and maybe they're getting off the whole wheat bread and focusing on, whole grains instead, or moving away from flours, or, not eating, even the healthy cookies, but moving towards healthier stuff, or getting away from the chips, And then for other people, it's going to be focusing on sprouting and, superfoods, fermented foods, getting into the really, really healthy whole foods that are supercharged. So wherever you are on the journey, getting rid of the bad, saying yes to the good, cultivating healthy habits, making friends with new recipes based on whole plant foods. And that's kind of the cornerstone of what we promote, is basing your diet around whole foods as opposed to processed junk, and plant-based, which is generally loaded with the phytonutrients, the antioxidants and the flavonoids, the vitamins, the minerals, all the phytochemicals that really help you thrive, and getting away from the animal products that are resource intensive, tend to be cruel, and are loaded with saturated fat and other compounds that are linked to higher risk of disease and premature death.
And isn't it? Yeah, and I know we've had guests on. Dan Buettner, I guess I wrote his name down as the Blue Zone guy. As we were kind of talking, and he talks about this quite a bit. But so, is it really a vegetarian diet specifically, or is it kind of? What that you guys typically promote, or what's the when you say moving away from? So, is it moving away from fish, eggs, dairy? Kind of what's the
generally, I want to see us eating less sugar and processed junk, less animal products, especially from factory farms, and more whole plant foods.
Got it.
So yeah, we are supportive of a vegan direction, but we don't use the V word a whole lot, because honestly, I think this world has enough fundamentalism.
Yes.
I think we got enough, I'm this and you're that, and we're in our camps, and we're going to fight it to the death. And, is it best to be 100% vegan or mostly? I'm not going to get into that argument, to be honest, because we're not all the same.
Sure.
But I can tell you that as a society, we need to move away from our dependence on animal products and towards more whole plant foods. And the benefits of doing so are enormous. And for some people, that means going all the way, and we totally celebrate and support that. And we show folks how to do it wisely. Because, any diet has its potential deficiencies or issues. And so, there's a few supplements that most people should be taking, but especially pure vegans should be taking, like B12, which you're not going to get from any plant foods for the most part, except
Right.
certain dirt. It's basically in dirt,
And that doesn't
but
taste the
unless you eat good organic dirt,
Right,
like
right, with honey.
and there are some downsides to that, I've got to say. So it's B12 is an example of like, yeah, strict vegans should be taking B12, and frankly, omnivores probably should as well
Yep,
in most
I do,
cases, because
yeah.
we don't all metabolize it efficiently. And also omega-3s are a concern. Specifically, if you don't eat fish,
Right.
then you should be taking, I think, an algae-sourced DHA or EPA.
Right.
Now, there's controversy about this, and it's not necessarily true for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are able to eat plenty of ALA and then convert it to EPA and DHA. These are the omega-3 fatty
Right.
acids I'm talking about here. But not everybody can convert efficiently, and EPA and DHA are not available in any plant foods except algae, which then feeds up the food chain into fish.
Right.
So that's just something to be aware of. Those are a couple of nutrients that we talk about. And in general, I'm a big fan of getting your nutrients from food, and I'm also a big fan of plant foods. And so if you're going to go totally vegan, then those are a couple nutrients among a few others,
You
to be
need to-
aware of.
Yeah, and I think all of us at this point, at a certain age, and probably even younger, folks know even better. But I think we all know that we should be eating more vegetables. We know we should be eating more leafy greens. I mean, it's not like it's a foreign science anymore. I mean, it's not like when I was growing up, or maybe you were growing up, or people older than us. It's like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. I know I need to eat more greens. I know I need to eat more vegetables. I think there's still some mystery around which vegetables to eat, and kind of how do you get enough calories? How do you get enough protein? I think some of that floats out there. But what was kind of, and it sounds like, your dad had written a book about this as well. So you may have grown up in this type of environment, but really, where did you get started? I guess what drives, typically I find people that have as much passion as you do, they typically have a big reason why. Somewhere, and usually it's deep down, from years ago, but what's driving your passion, or where did it kind of start?
Well, I mean, my family story is a pretty interesting one. So my grandpa Irv founded an ice cream company called Baskin-Robbins.
Oh my gosh,
And
I did not know.
yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you're, okay,
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
I apologize for not knowing that, but literally Baskin-Robbins. Your name is Ocean
Baskin-Robbins.
Robbins.
That's Ocean Robbins,
Right,
grandson of the
Baskin-Robbins.
founder of
Baskin-Robbins.
Baskin-Robbins.
Oh, this is,
Yeah.
okay, that's super cool. Yeah.
So my dad John grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard and 31 flavors of ice cream in the freezer.
Oh my gosh. I
Yeah,
love
he
it.
was groomed to one day join and running the family company,
Okay.
but when he was in his early 20s, he was offered that chance, and he said no, and he walked away from a path that was practically paved with gold and ice cream
Right.
to, as we jokingly say in our family, follow his own rocky road. And he ended up moving with my mom to a little island off the coast of Canada. They built a one-room log cabin, grew most of their own food,
Wow.
practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day, and named their
Wow.
kid Ocean.
And I didn't bring that up. I wasn't going to bring it up because I was like, he's got to get that question all the time. I'm just going to let that one be. Okay.
Well, by the way, they almost named me Kale. This was before Kale was cool.
Right before that was an in thing. But
I've got to say, I lucked out.
Yeah.
My social life lucked out that
Yeah.
they chose the more conservative name when they named their son. But we did eat a lot of kale and cabbage and carrots and other
Yeah.
veggies from the garden.
Right.
And when I got a little older, my dad ended up researching the food industry in which he had grown up, and
Right.
coming out with a book called Diet for a New America in 1987, which
Mm-hmm.
became this runaway bestseller. And it was about how our food choices affect our health
Right.
and our world.
Mm-hmm.
And the media called him the rebel without a cone, among other things, and the prophet of nonprofit.
Right.
And he inspired a lot of folks, including, as fate would have it, my grandpa. Now, my dad's uncle Bert Baskin, my grandpa's brother-in-law and business partner,
Wow. Okay.
had
gets even
had
deeper.
died of heart disease at the age of 54.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
my dad's uncle Bert was a big man. He
Yeah.
always ate the standard American diet plus a whole lot of ice cream.
Right.
And, he was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in American history,
Right.
but he didn't have his health.
Right.
And he left his wife a widow and his kids
gosh.
fatherless
Right.
at 54.
Right.
And so my grandpa Irv at 69 was on a similar trajectory. He had
Mm-hmm.
serious heart issues, weight issues, type 2 diabetes. His doctors told him he didn't have long to live unless he made some big changes.
Right.
And they give him a copy of my dad's book.
Wow.
And this is where the story gets even more interesting. My grandpa Irv read the book, not the autographed copy my dad had sent him when it came out, mind you,
Right.
but the copy the doctor gave him in the doctor's office, right?
Nice, beautiful.
He read it and he followed its advice, and he ended up cutting way down on animal product consumption, cutting way down on processed foods, giving up sugar, giving up ice cream.
Wow.
Yeah, seriously, I kid you not. He gave up ice cream and he started eating way more fruits and vegetables and whole plant foods. And he got stunning results. And he was a very methodical man. He tracked everything in charts.
Wow.
And so he was tracking his, his blood test scores and diabetes numbers and his medicine intakes and his dietary intake. And what he saw was this massive change within a couple of months. He lost about 30 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And before long, he was off his diabetes and blood pressure meds that he had been told he would take for the rest of his life.
Right.
And he was walking 5 miles a day with his dog every morning.
Wow.
And his golf game improved 7 strokes.
Which was probably the most important to him at that time.
Probably. He lived on a golf course, and golf was a big part of his life.
Right. Seven strokes is a lot off your handicap.
That's a lot. So he lived 19 more healthy years.
Oh, good.
And, so we've really seen in our family that, when we follow the standard American diet, we get the standard American diseases. I mean, I never even knew my dad's Uncle Bert.
Right.
Because he died before I was born.
Right.
But I certainly knew my grandpa, and I knew what he was suffering with, and I saw his fear, and then I saw his transformation, and knew him for 19 more years. I had my grandpa in my life until I was in my 30s because of the changes he made when I was a teenager, and because of the work my dad did. And, a lot of us have a hard time making changes, right? We've got a lot of investment in the way we've always done stuff. And so for many of us, making big changes, especially in something as personal as what we eat, is super hard. Can you imagine how hard it was for my grandpa to make a change in his diet?
That's crazy.
This is a man who had manufactured and sold more ice cream than anyone who's ever lived. And, newsflash, ice cream's not a health food. And so for him, he had a investment, to say the least, in saying there's no connection between diet and health, right? It's all genetics.
Right.
But he went ahead and made these changes because he wanted to live.
Right.
And he became an example, I think, to the rest of us that major change is possible.
Right.
And it can lead to major benefits, right? At any age. And so, I think that's a story that really moved me in my youth.
Definitely.
As did the tens of thousands of letters that we received as a family in response to my dad's book. He put a little memo in the back saying, hey, if you were inspired by this, write me at this P.O. box, basically.
Nice.
And the P.O. box got, in the Felton, California, which was where the P.O. box was located, at one point there were over half of the mail coming to that PO system was for responses to my dad's book.
Wow.
Every day there'd be a box full of letters, and we'd have to go in person because the PO box couldn't fit it. Neither could a PO drawer.
Right.
We were kind of taking over the post office, and it was all people saying, like, thank you, you've changed my life. Like tens of thousands of real handwritten letters. This is back before email, And
right, of course, yeah.
So growing up as a youngster, seeing that, I was like, wow, this stuff is powerful. And so I founded a nonprofit when I was 16. I didn't just want to do what my dad did. So, being a little rebellious, I worked with young leaders around the world in 65 countries, focused on social justice, peace, human rights, and sustainability. It was kind of a youth leadership nonprofit. And called Yes World. It's still going to this day. And but I directed that for 20 years. And as I work with leaders all over the planet, I kept seeing that what we're eating is having this massive impact. And I work with indigenous leaders in the Amazon who were telling us about how their rainforest homeland was being destroyed for cattle grazing and for soy plantations to guess what? Feed livestock.
Oh, right.
And I saw indigenous leaders in the Arctic who are dependent on the caribou herds for their survival. And those caribou herds are now threatened by climate change. And then I saw the UN reports showing us that, cows impact our climate more than cars do.
Yeah, I've read that as well.
In light of this, I said, I've got to focus on food. If we want to really change the world and help heal lives and heal the world, we got to focus on food. So I joined with my dad in 2012 to launch Food Revolution Network with the mission of healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for all. And, this has been my passion, ever since. And, we really do want to change the way the world eats. And it's a big mission, but it's happening. Honestly, it's happening right now. Like we are seeing profound, almost unimaginable changes at the rate of change. I mean, the number of Americans who identify as vegan
Mhm.
has 30x'd,
Wow.
30-fold increase, in the last 15 years. Who
Yeah,
would have thought that
yeah,
would happen,
right.
So, and we're not all about vegan per se, but the number of people who are
Moving that
interested in eating
direction.
more plant
Right.
foods
Yeah,
is like about half the population now. And
exactly.
that's where you start to get major change when like half the population is saying, hey, this is possible. And
Yep.
just like we've seen change in cars, we went
Hmm.
from electric cars being a weird outlier
Right.
to being like the future of the automotive industry.
Yeah.
I would say that, plant proteins and plant foods in general are the future of the food industry.
Hmm.
And, that's good news for our planet.
And 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 I agree 110%. The when we talk about though sustainability in food, so again, kind of back to people that are living in their house and they're working, doing whatever they're living their life, and we're talking about sustainably grown food. What do you mean by sustainably grown food versus um, I'm just going to go to the grocery store and buy what is in the grocery store? So kind of help us understand sustainably grown food.
Well, sustainable is a catchphrase that can mean a lot of different
Hmm.
things, and there is no official
Right.
definition, but I'll tell you some things to look out for.
Hmm.
So organic matters.
Hmm.
Organic is a certification, and it means that no unapproved pesticides were used, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides. And it also means that no chemical fertilizers were used in the
Hmm.
production of that food. And in the case of animal products, it means that they were fed organic feed as well.
Right.
And so, organic is a big deal because most of our food is being contaminated not just with insecticides that kill bugs, but also with herbicides that kill weeds,
Right.
but that also end up, in the food chain. So, like glyphosate, which is the
Right.
main active ingredient in Roundup,
Hmm.
is, a probable carcinogen, an endocrine disruptor,
Hmm.
and it's been patented as an antibiotic, so it can disrupt
Lots of different
bacteria
things.
in the gut, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
this is now the most widespread pesticide in use today.
Hmm.
Just to be clear, pesticide includes all of the biocides,
Hmm.
herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides are all considered pesticides. Some
Hmm.
people are confused on that point.
Mm.
So organic foods are growing without chemical
Right.
versions of those things. There are still some compounds that are used to kill bugs, for example, that are approved for organic agriculture,
Oh, I didn't know
but
that.
they are far less toxic
Hmm.
than the ones that are used in industrialized agriculture.
Okay.
That said, we now have the spread of what some call organic ink.
Hmm.
The industrialized 20,000 acre organic farm
Right.
that follows the letter of the law, but is not necessarily super sustainable. They're still using big machinery.
Right.
They're
Yep.
still, they're
Hmm.
doing everything they can to industrialize for mass production at the lowest possible price. And the good news is it's a step forward. The bad news is it's not as big a step forward as some of us would like. Those of
Sure.
us who want to see things like companion planting, who want to
Hmm.
see things like berms and swales and water saving techniques, who
Hmm.
want to see a real focus on recarbonizing the soil
Right.
rather than exploiting it so that the soil's getting richer with every successive year,
Hmm.
who love to see cover crops, who love to see, there's a lot of techniques that organic farmers can use when they're really focused on sustainability rather than this year's profits,
Right.
right? And
Hmm.
so there's a new term being thrown around called regenerative
Hmm.
agriculture.
Right.
Sometimes that's associated specifically with grazing techniques in livestock. Sometimes it means nothing to do with that. It just means ways of growing food that create more carbon in the soil, right?
Hmm.
And so different people define it different ways. Definitions are all over the map.
Hmm.
There's a bit of a myth out there that pasture raised or grass fed beef is regenerative and therefore draws carbon out of the atmosphere and it's good for the planet. Or that there are ways to do it that are. And
Right.
I am sad to say that the research so far, if that was true, I would be all for it.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, the research so far finds that that theory is quite lacking.
Right.
While it is possible for certain grazing techniques to get more carbon directly in the soil, the total impact of the cows on that land with belching methane and various other impacts that they have is still negative, and it takes a lot of land to graze beef.
Hmm.
And that's all land that can't be turned into forest.
Right.
or other things that are far more effective at sequestering carbon. So if we're really serious about sequestering carbon, we're going to have to eat a lot less beef so we can turn grazing land back into forest land.
Got it.
83% of the world's agricultural land is being used for livestock production right now, for 19% of the world's calories, 33% of the world's protein. And so we really have kind of a protein factory in reverse.
Yeah.
We're taking land and we're when we go up the food chain, we're losing efficiency.
Right.
Because most of what the cows eat is biomass
Right.
that they are turning into hoof and hide and bones and manure and heat and
Right.
energy they used to move around, not into flesh or milk or eggs. So at the end of the day, if we want sustainability, we have to move in that direction. Now, as an individual, eating plant-based is a great way to walk lighter on the earth, lower on the food chain. It's also going organic is a great way to get rid of the pesticides. And if you can go further and support local small-scale
Yeah,
farms
that's
in
what I
your
was gonna say
community,
next, yeah.
farmers markets,
Yep.
things like that, that's fantastic. And then I'm also a big proponent of fair trade certification when you're buying bananas or other foods that are grown in tropical countries.
And I've seen that. So what does that mean, fair trade? Because I've seen that on shampoos, I think, conditioners, to your point, food. So what the heck does fair? I know what organic. I mean, I kind of have a general idea of grant, but I have no idea what fair trade means. What does that mean?
Well, in principle, what it means is that the people who grew the food or product were treated fairly, were paid enough to feed their own families.
Oh, okay. So
Perhaps the farmers were paid enough that they could do the right thing on their land as well. Because when farmers are in desperation, they're more likely to cut corners to squeeze out maximal profits. They'll
Sure, of
sneak in
course.
some pesticides, even if they're certified organic, if they think they can get away with it, because they're on the edge.
Right.
And we see this most direly in the chocolate industry, where millions of children in Ivory Coast and Ghana are functionally enslaved. They're not even in school. They have to work all day in the fields to keep their family's cocoa production up, because they get paid barely enough to keep a roof over their heads, and they get paid per pound of cocoa. And so if the kids are out there in the field, the family gets more pounds, and
Right.
that's how they're able to survive.
Right.
So that and so parents are faced between, how do I have enough food to feed my kids, and do I have to make my kids work all day instead of being in school? And so a lot of them are making their kids work. And so this is one of the consequences you get that can lead to generational cycles of poverty, because we didn't pay an extra few pennies a pound for our chocolate, and so that little bit can make a huge difference. So fair trade certification basically says that there was a monitoring body that looked at the data and looked at the practices and said, yeah, this is legit. And there are a lot of different monitoring bodies, they have different standards, but they all mean something, and it's all a step forward.
Right, and I think that was the point I was getting ready to make, is it's not perfect. And I think when you were talking about the chocolate thing, I'd never even heard of that or thought of that. But I think it's more about raising the awareness so people can vote with their dollars and their choices, right? About, now that I know more about fair trade, I'll start looking for it more, because you've educated me today about what fair trade is. What is fair trade, right? And so I think that's a huge step, is just helping people understand that these things are even happening in the world. I had no idea that was happening in Africa until you just brought that up. So that's cool stuff.
Absolutely.
That's really cool.
It is.
Are there some companies out there that you really like in the space, organic, fair trade, that you're just like, you're a raving fan, or stuff that you consume? And because and this show's not getting sponsored by any of these companies. And I'm just, maybe they'll send me a crate of something. Maybe I think that's what happens on the big shows, right? It's like, oh, I got a crate of oranges, right? But but we do need to highlight companies that are doing it the right way, right? I mean, that's how this whole machine works. It's like, if once people find out, oh wait, this company's actually, and we've started to see that in some companies that, well, especially obviously like Elon Musk and the whole, he's huge now, right? Because of the electric car thing. So yeah, what companies do you would be examples, I guess? What could be some examples of companies that you think are doing a really good job at trying to do these things?
I mean, there are a lot of them, which is the good news. More and more companies that are really merging people, planet, and profits as their bottom line, the triple bottom line, as they call it. One of my personal favorites, just amazing companies, is Dr. Bronner's.
Oh yeah, we have that in our house.
They are the real deal. They are a mission-driven company. They donate huge amounts of their proceeds to support good causes. Within their own company, they pay all their employees quite well. They have a 5-to-1 maximum spread between the highest paid and lowest paid employee, and that enables them to treat their people well and offer generous benefits. And then they give a lot to support good causes, and they pay farmers well. Every ingredient is sourced consciously and intentionally, and they're just starting to get into food a little bit. I think they actually are coming out with a fair trade chocolate now. And that's super ethical. So they're a cool company. You know, there are a lot of good companies out there, but you know, David Bronner's a friend, and so I have to mention them.
Good, perfect. I'm glad, because that was. Can you get him to put this print on those bottles bigger, because I cannot read it. It is like 6-point or something, and I'm like, and half the time I don't understand it. That I'm like, I think it's probably, but I'm like, if you can't read it, I'm sure it's just the intentionality around the bottle, right?
They are quirky. There's no doubt about it.
I was like, but just make it big enough so that if I do want to read it, I can read it in the shower or whatever, right? But, so yes, tell him to put that print bigger, or at least put a QR code so I can pull it up somewhere and actually see what the heck it says.
I bet it's on their website somewhere.
Probably. All right. So you like Dr. Bronner's for kind of household type. Oh, well, I know they do soaps and shampoos. I don't know what else they do, but I know they do soaps and shampoos because we have it at our house. So food wise, what do we think food wise? What's a company that we could kind of...
I mean, the best company is going to be your local farmer's market.
Right.
And,
okay.
Actually, I'm a big fan of community-supported agriculture, which is kind of even a step further. There are over 10,000 community-supported agriculture programs in the U.S. right now, many more around the world. And CSAs, as they're known, are basically where you develop a relationship with a farmer and you get a share of their harvest. And some of them are like, you get a box every week, and it's whatever the heck they have on the farm, you know? So it's like, it's zucchini week, or oh wow, it's celeriac week, or whatever, and you get all this stuff. Right. And then you kind of have a stake in their success. And for the farmer, it takes some of the pressure off because they have guaranteed income.
Sure.
And they also otherwise, because obviously harvests go up and down with different seasonality and different dynamics. And so if you get a stake in that, sometimes you get more, if you're willing to be more flexible with the farm, then you get more food, you get more bang for your buck, so to speak. And others of them, you actually every week make an order and you're like, hey, here's what here's what we got and here's what we're selling it for. And you just take what you want. And that's, you know, more consumer friendly, and you're probably going to pay a premium price for that type of model. But either way, you just show up or they deliver and you get your box and it's all at once, and it actually can save time from a consumer perspective. And it gets a relationship with that farm. And then when supply chains break down and trucks aren't shipping stuff all over the world, and there's trucker protests happening at the border or whatever the heck happens, you got your food covered, you know, because you know you're a farmer, and that's a pretty awesome place to be. Obviously, growing food is even the best of all, by the way. They say, think globally, act locally. Well, you don't get more local than your own backyard, and you don't get more food security than that. And it's therapeutic, and you can really control what goes in, and you get to be a part of the solution on planet Earth at the most tangible level. And, you know, if you've got kids in your family, studies show that when kids are part of growing vegetables, they eat more vegetables. Not just then, but for lifelong, because they're developing habits, right? So that relationship with food is really important. And so the more personal it gets, whether it's growing your own, knowing the farmer, harvesting at your neighbor's field, whatever it is, those things are like the best of the best, right? And then farmers markets are like one step out from that. And then shopping at a locally owned co-op or grocery store that's not a big chain, but it's a natural food store that focuses on healthy stuff. Like that's the next step up. Then you go to sort of chain stores like Whole Foods or what have you. And then you go to like deal with what you got. You know, there's people who Walmart's the only way they can get organic produce. Well, if that's your situation, then you know, I guess that's where you go. But at the end of the day, trying to focus then on organic and fair trade certification, and then you kind of go out the rungs and you're like, just eat lots of vegetables, you know, like if all you can do is eat commercially grown vegetables, you know, and you don't have access to any of these other things I'm talking about, don't let that stop you. We have tens of thousands of studies that are published in peer-reviewed journals showing us that eating vegetables is healthy for you. Most of the vegetables in those studies were not organic. They weren't growing in backyards, you know, they were the Walmart type, and they still get lots of health benefits. So, you know, do the best you can with what you got. And, you know, if your best option is, you know, finding the healthiest salad, you know, at a fast food restaurant,
I've done that.
That's still going to be a step better than eating the junkiest, you know, burger at that same restaurant. So, you know, you do what you can, you take steps, and you keep going forward. and then see if you can go further.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I love the way you articulated that. Very straightforward, very simple. And I never had anybody just line it up like that. Basically like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I've kind of felt that and known that just in my own, evolution of eating. But yeah, that's a perfect way to look at it. And those CSAs, because I've been a member off and on for throughout the years, but you just Google, CSAs in my city, right? It's not complex, right? You can find these things locally if you just Google it or whatever. I'm not promoting Google here. Whatever way you want to search, but they're out there. Search engine.
Yeah,
exactly. For whatever search engine you choose, you're going to find this stuff. So it's not, and I think I found it's kind of fun. To your point,
yes.
to when you're interacting with people that are more local, you're getting to know them. A lot of times you end up knowing people that they know, and it's just a more, I guess, holistic and a very positive way relationship that you're having with your food. Because I know, when we were doing that, certainly you did get the wild card stuff once in a while, and you're like, what the heck is that, and how do we make it? And now we have to, and so it became kind of this fun game of, okay, what is it, and let's figure out how to cook it or how to prepare it, and then let's, so you're learning stuff, I guess, is my point, and it's more adventurous than just eating the same thing over and over and over every day, which I think a lot of us get into that routine.
We do, and if you're doing that, at least make it a good thing, most of us have a fairly small starting rotation of things we make super regularly, and so if you can swap out even one of those recipes with a healthy one, that's more power to you. The thing to remember is that, like any skill, healthy eating takes practice,
right?
And you get better at it, and it gets easier. So nobody picks up a musical instrument and sounds good on the first day. Even Mozart probably didn't sound good the very first time he touched a piano. But with practice, you get better and better at it, and so you need to practice, though, and most of us are well practiced in our existing habits,
right?
And so we've developed a degree of fluency. I know people who can find a McDonald's, in any city in the country. Like they just sniff it out, like
right. No, it'll be located over here.
Yeah, exactly. So you learn how to find the healthy options and the healthy foods step by step, and make them part of your starting rotation. I mean, the first time you make a new recipe, it might take 45 minutes,
right?
And that doesn't even count the extra trip to the store to get the ingredients you didn't have.
Right.
But the 20th time you make it, it might take 7 minutes because you've mastered it. You're not even looking at the book anymore. You just know what to do, and you throw it in, boom, 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 and done. And you already have the ingredients because they're just naturally part of your shopping every month.
Right.
Yep.
So
that's the thing that you learn is how to get fluency. And if you can develop healthy habits and get fluency in things that are actually good for you, then eventually you learn to love them. I don't know if you have this experience, but when I hear a song for the first time, I might not like it.
Right.
And after like the 30th time, you hear it enough on the radio, eventually it gets to be like an old friend. You're like, oh yeah, and you're dancing.
Right.
Because you get familiar. And foods are a little bit like that. I mean, we actually have studies that show that the first time people eat kale, it tastes bitter to them often.
Right.
And by the 7th or 8th time, it starts to taste sweeter. And there's actually a science to this. Your saliva is learning to secrete certain enzymes
to break
it down and make it taste sweeter in your mouth. So, your body does learn to adjust, and you actually feed the bacteria in your gut that thrive on the foods you eat. So if you're feeding them lots of sugar, then you're breeding bacteria that like sugar. Exactly. Right. And if you can actually have bacteria that like kale, and they then send a signal to your stomach that you're hungry for kale. So it actually is possible to learn to love foods that love you back.
Oh, that's nice. I like that. Love foods that love you back. That's a good one. Well, so much great information today. People can find your stuff at foodrevolutionnetwork.com.org.
Foodrevolution.org is the best website to go to.
Foodrevolution.org. Okay.
And you can also go to foodrevolutionsummit.org to check out our annual Food Revolution Summit and hear the latest interviews from 24 of the top food experts on the planet.
I love that. Love that. And if it works out for you, we have our Global Happiness Summit, which one day we'll be talking specifically about health. And we'd love to have you come back and do a live presentation there for our viewers. I think we'll have a little over 50,000 people that will attend that this year. So we'd love to have you on because I love your passion. I love your energy. I love the backstory. Hey, by the way, does your family still own Baskin-Robbins?
No, my grandpa sold it back in the 60s.
Oh, he did?
When his brother-in-law was dying,
good for him.
He got a big offer and he moved on. And that's when my dad kind of made his pivotal choice because my grandpa basically said, look,
Oh,
I
you
won't
take it.
sell.
Oh,
If
got
you
it.
want to join and take over,
Right.
you know, when Uncle Bert passes,
Right.
then we can do this together.
Right.
And my dad said, no, thank you. That's not my path. And my grandpa said, you'll make a lot of money.
Right.
And if you leave, you won't. And my dad
Right.
was like,
Yeah,
Dad,
figured
do
it.
what you got to do. Sell the company if that's what's best for you and Uncle Bert, you know, because I've got to follow my own path. And
Right.
I don't feel that I was put on this planet to sell ice cream.
Right.
And, you know, my grandpa was shocked and kind of horrified. You know, they had a very tough time for a long time because
Right.
my grandpa felt really betrayed. You know, he loved that it was a family owned company.
Of course.
And,
Yeah. Took pride in that.
and in turn, what happened after, you know, he left, he was not happy with. I mean, today, Baskin-Robbins doesn't even make their own ice cream.
Oh,
You know, they outsource that and, you know, they've changed their ingredient profiles. It's just become it used to be a kind of relatively natural food, so to speak. And now
Right.
it's become very, very, you know, mainstream commercialized like
Manufactured.
any other ice cream out there. And, you know, my grandpa was mad about that along with other things. Like they used to, up to the point that my grandpa sold the company, pretty much everyone who'd ever started a franchise store with them was still in business. They didn't lose anybody.
Right.
But after that, they started to have a lower batting average. Not all the franchises succeeded because the company went for mass expansion and they were
Sure.
willing to have people not succeed. And my grandpa was very proud and like, nobody loses out here. We don't fire people.
Right.
Everybody wins when you join this company. And then the company changed to have more of a
Right.
mass production approach. And there was some cost in that. My grandpa was very bitter about that for a
that's
long
too
time.
bad.
And he blamed my dad for it.
Oh, gosh.
Because it's like, if you'd stuck around, we wouldn't
Right.
be
We
here,
wouldn't-
you
we
know?
wouldn't have done that.
But at the end of the day, you know, he ended up, of course, having his transformation and seeing what can happen when you make a change in your diet. And,
Right.
you know, their relationship kind of had a healing. And, you know,
Oh.
we've seen, as we say in our family, blood is thicker than ice cream. you know,
Right. Yeah. Well,
in the
that's-
long run.
Yeah.
But it was quite a journey for sure.
It sounds like it. Yeah, you guys need to write a book just about that whole process. If you haven't, maybe there is a
My dad's written about it quite a bit.
has
yeah.
he? Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing story. So yeah, and just from one, not extreme necessarily, but from one state of being kind of to the next in your family over generations. That's kind of a you know, very interesting dynamic, I'm sure. In a
Yes,
positive way, in a
absolutely.
very positive way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Ocean, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We'll make sure we put links to all the ways that people can engage with the great work that you're putting out. And a lot of the stuff, I think you actually do the education and some of the in the network, right? You're actually active in the network and you publish stuff and put out videos and stuff like that. So it'd be very similar to what we're experiencing today as far as the passion and the drive and I love it. I love talking to passionate people every day. That's what gets me out of bed. So it's a fun thing to do.
Sweet. All right. Thank you so much for having me on. And for everybody who's listening, thanks for your attention and your participation. You know, you are part of the food revolution every time you choose real food over processed junk, every time you eat lower on the food chain, every time you learn and grow, and every time you spread the word. So I thank you for all your steps, large and small, to help change the world with your knife and fork.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE Vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.